Picture this. It's December 17th, 1742, and the sun hasn't even thought about rising yet. The kind of cold that makes your breath freeze before it leaves your mouth. The kind of morning where every blade of grass is a tiny crystal sculpture, and the world looks like it's been dipped in silver. Running Wolf crouches in the pre-dawn darkness, his stomach gnawing at itself like a trapped animal. 3 days. 3 days since he or any of his 42 followers had eaten anything more substantial than pine bark tea and strips of old leather boiled until they resembled something you might charitably call soup. And let me tell you something about pine bark tea. It's about as nutritious as it sounds. Which is to say, not at all. Now, Running Wolf wasn't supposed to be out here with his own hunting party. By all rights, he should have been back with the main band, following the traditional methods that had worked for generations under Elder Stone Arrow's guidance. But Running Wolf had made the mistake that young men have been making since the dawn of time. He questioned authority. He suggested there might be better ways to track wounded game. Stone Arrow, who had been successfully hunting buffalo since before Running Wolf was born, took about as kindly to this suggestion as you'd expect. So here Running Wolf sits, cast out with those loyal enough or foolish enough to follow him, watching his people slowly starve while he tries to prove he was right. The pressure must have been enormous. Imagine being responsible for 42 lives in the middle of a brutal plains winter, with your credibility hanging by a thread thinner than spider silk. That's when he sees them. A pack of wolves, maybe 8 or 9 strong, moving through the snow with that peculiar confidence that predators have when they know exactly where dinner is hiding. But here's what catches Running Wolf's attention. These wolves aren't following the obvious trail. There, clear as day in the fresh snow, are buffalo tracks, big, deep impressions that even a child could follow. But the wolves? They're ignoring those tracks completely. Instead, they're doing something else entirely. Something that makes Running Wolf's breath catch in his throat despite the cold. The lead wolf stops at a patch of grass that looks completely ordinary to human eyes, just bent stalks poking through the snow. Nothing special. But this wolf sniffs, pauses, then moves forward with the deliberate certainty of someone following a highway. The wolf stops again at another unremarkable spot, repeats the process, and continues on. Running Wolf realizes he's witnessing something that could change everything. These wolves are reading a story written in a language he's never learned to speak. For the next hour, as the sky slowly lightens from black to deep purple to pale grey, Running Wolf follows at a distance. He watches the wolves navigate through terrain where the buffalo tracks disappear entirely, rocky patches, wind-swept areas where snow won't stick, sections where other animals have trampled the ground into an unreadable mess. But the wolves never hesitate. They know something, and then Running Wolf sees what they know. The wounded buffalo cow, standing in a grove of cottonwoods about 2 miles from where the obvious tracks had vanished. She's favoring her left front leg, a spear wound from some earlier hunt attempt slowly bleeding her strength away. The wolves have led him straight to her by following what he now realizes must be microscopic signs, traces so subtle that human eyes had never thought to look for them. In that moment, watching those wolves prepare for their kill, Running Wolf understands that his people have been hunting like humans when they should have been hunting like wolves. They've been following what animals leave behind instead of what animals can't help but leave behind. Think about it from a modern perspective. It's like the difference between following someone's social media posts and reading their digital footprint. The posts are obvious, but the real information, tenation, the metadata, the location services, the search history, that tells you everything. The buffalo cow doesn't stand a chance against the wolves, and Running Wolf doesn't interfere. This is nature's classroom, and he's finally ready to be a student instead of just another struggling teacher. As he watches the pack work, he begins to notice details that would have escaped him just hours before. The way the cow's injured leg creates a slightly different pressure pattern in snow. How her labored breathing creates tiny moisture clouds that settle differently on nearby vegetation. The almost invisible drops of blood that mark her passage. 9. Not the dramatic splashes you might imagine, but tiny crimson dots that catch morning light for just a moment before fading. Running Wolf makes a decision that will echo through generations. Instead of rushing back to camp with news of the kill, Instead of trying to claim the wolf's prize for his hungry people, he begins to experiment. For the next 3 months, 3 entire months, Running Wolf becomes a student of invisible signs. He follows wounded animals secretly, comparing what his eyes can learn against what wolf behavior teaches him. He develops what will become known as the 7 Signs System, though he doesn't know to call it that yet. He just knows that animals in pain leave traces that healthy animals don't, and those traces follow patterns that can be learned, categorized, understood. Blood oxidation patterns, PICLO. How the color and texture of blood spots change over time, telling you not just that an animal passed this way, but when. Grass springback timing, how long bent vegetation takes to return to its natural position, affected by the weight and gait of whatever disturbed it. Track depth variations that reveal favored legs and injured limbs. Scent trail degradation rates that follow predictable timelines. Insect activity on blood spots that creates tiny ecosystems of information. Temperature differences in disturbed earth that persist longer than you'd think. Moisture patterns in hoof prints that tell stories about animal condition and stress levels. By spring, Running Wolf has transformed from a cast-out questioner of tradition into something entirely new, a hunter who can track animals across terrain that should be impossible to read. His first major demonstration comes when the main hunting party encounters a massive bull buffalo, wounded but still dangerous, that Elder Stone Arrow declares impossible to track across a stretch of bare rock and wind-scattered earth. The other hunters are ready to give up, to mark it down as another near miss in a season full of them. But Running Wolf steps forward. Running Wolf steps forward, and you can imagine the tension crackling through that hunting party like electricity before a thunderstorm. Here's this young man who was cast out for questioning tradition, approaching a tracking problem that has stumped Elder Stone Arrow himself. The wounded bull's trail has vanished across what looks like a moonscape of bare rock and wind-scattered debris. To the traditional eye, it's like trying to follow footprints across a parking lot. But Running Wolf kneels down where the tracks disappear and begins doing something the other hunters have never seen before. He's not looking for hoof prints. Instead, he's examining tiny dark spots on the rock face, spots so small they might be shadows or dirt stains. He touches one with his fingertip, sniffs it, then moves forward with the confidence of someone reading a map. 20 minutes later, they find the bull, bedded down in a hidden ravine, exactly where Running Wolf said it would be. The kill feeds the entire band for a week. That demonstration in the spring of 1743 becomes the first crack in the dam. But Running Wolf isn't satisfied, and with individual success. He understands something that most innovators throughout history eventually figure out. Revolutionary techniques die with their creators unless they become movements. So begins what might be the most systematic knowledge transfer program in Native American hunting history. Running Wolf doesn't just teach the wolf method, he creates a school. Over the next 20 years, through 18 separate summer gatherings between 1745 and 1763, Running Wolf and his growing circle of disciples transform Cheyenne hunting culture from the ground up. Think about the scale of this transformation. We're talking about knowledge spreading across thousands of square miles of prairie, carried by word of mouth and careful demonstration. No written manuals, no video tutorials, no internet forums, just human beings teaching other human beings to see patterns that had been invisible for centuries. The famous contest at Bear Butte in 1751 becomes the stuff of legend. Picture this scene. Representatives from the northern bands, the southern bands, and the fierce dog soldier societies all gathered for what amounts to a hunting Olympics. Traditional hunters using methods that had been refined over generations facing off against Running Wolf's disciples using the wolf method. Black Kettle, Running Wolf's star protégé, steps forward to represent the new way. He's maybe 25 years old, lean and focused in the way that master craftsmen get when they know they're about to demonstrate something extraordinary. The challenge: track and kill buffalo in a single day, with the entire gathering watching and keeping score. By sunset, the results speak for themselves. The traditional hunters, skilled men all, manage 3 kills using techniques that had served the people well for generations. Black Kettle, reading invisible signs in grass and earth, brings down 7 buffalo. 7. in one day. But here's what makes this truly revolutionary. A. It's not magic. Black Kettle doesn't have supernatural powers or mystical connections to animal spirits. He simply knows how to read information that was always there. He can tell from the depth and angle of a hoofprint whether an animal is favoring one leg. He can age blood spots by color and texture, determining whether he's following a trail from this morning or 3 days ago. He can read the subtle differences in how grass springs back after being stepped on by healthy animals versus wounded ones. The wolf method becomes more than a hunting technique. It becomes a pathway to prestige and power. The Kit Fox and Elkhorn warrior societies incorporate the 7 signs into their initiation rites. Young men now spend 7 days alone on the prairie, learning to distinguish between bent grass that was stepped on an hour ago versus grass that was disturbed yesterday. They learn to identify the specific insect activity that develops around different types of blood spots, creating tiny ecological clocks that tell time in ways their ancestors never imagined. The transformation in Cheyenne hunting success rates is dramatic and measurable. Success rates climb from 1 in 3 hunts to 2 in 3. Think about what that means for a people living on the edge of survival. It's the difference between frequent hunger and consistent abundance. Between barely making it through winter and having surplus to trade. New wealth begins flowing through the camps in ways that reshape social structures. Surplus hides become trade goods. Pemmican stores last entire winters instead of running out by February. Larger populations can be supported, which means bigger bands, which means more political and military power on the plains. But Running Wolf understands that knowledge is also a weapon. The strategic decision to exclude certain tribes from the wolf method becomes a form of economic warfare. Pawnee and crow hunting parties, still using traditional techniques, find themselves at a severe disadvantage. They're tracking animals the hard way, while Cheyenne hunters use methods that seem almost supernatural in their effectiveness. Running Wolf also grasps the importance of strategic marriages in spreading knowledge while maintaining control. When his daughter Whitefeather marries an Arapaho chief's son, it creates the first intertribal tracking alliance. The Arapaho gain access to modified versions of the wolf method, while the Cheyenne ensure that their closest allies share in the hunting revolution. Specialized roles emerge within Cheyenne society that would have been inconceivable just a generation earlier. Morning scouts who check dew patterns for signs of overnight animal movement, blood readers who can age trail signs with the precision of forensic scientists, and most elite of all, the night hunters, TIS, trackers so skilled they can follow wounded animals by moonlight using touch and smell alone. These night hunters represent the absolute pinnacle of the wolf method. Imagine the level of skill required to track an injured animal across miles of prairie in near total darkness, reading signs through fingertips and nostrils that most people couldn't detect in broad daylight. They become legendary figures, spoken of in the same breath as the greatest warriors and medicine men. The integration of the technique into daily life goes beyond hunting. Children play games based on the 7 signs, learning to spot blood oxidation patterns and track depth variations, as naturally as modern kids learn to ride bicycles. Women incorporate the signs into beadwork patterns, creating beautiful art that doubles as educational tools. The wolf method becomes woven into the cultural fabric so thoroughly that it's no longer a special technique. It's simply the way Cheyenne people understand the natural world. By 1760, when Running Wolf is in his 50s, and the wolf method has been refined through nearly 2 decades of practical application, the Cheyenne have achieved something unprecedented in Plains Indian culture. They've become the undisputed masters of buffalo hunting across a territory stretching from the Platte River to the Arkansas. Other tribes trade with them, fight them, fear them, but they all acknowledge Cheyenne hunting supremacy. The ripple effects extend far beyond individual hunting success. Political power on the plains increasingly flows to those who can guarantee food security. Military campaigns become possible because armies can be fed reliably. Diplomatic negotiations carry more weight when backed by the confidence that comes from abundance rather than scarcity. But perhaps most importantly, the wolf method represents something that transcends hunting technique. It demonstrates the power of systematic observation, of questioning traditional assumptions, of treating the natural world as a text that can be learned to read. In many ways, Running Wolf has created the foundation for what we might recognize as scientific methodology, hypothesis, experimentation, verification, knowledge transfer. As the 1760s dawn, with the Cheyenne at the height of their hunting prowess and the wolf method spreading through alliance networks across the Central Plains, it must have seemed like this golden age could last forever. But change was coming to the prairies, carried on 4 legs and iron wheels, bringing technologies that would challenge everything the wolf method represented. The summer of 1773. If you wanted to pick a single moment when the Cheyenne Nation reached the absolute peak of their power on the Great Plains, this would be it. Running Wolf's son, Eagle Eye, now leads what historians would later call the Great Circle Hunt, TAT, a coordinated effort involving 8 separate bands and over 300 hunters, all using refined versions of the wolf method that his father had developed 3 decades earlier. Picture the scale of this operation. We're talking about a hunting expedition that covers hundreds of square miles, with tracking teams positioned like pieces on a vast chessboard, each team leader trained in the 7 signs, each capable of reading grass patterns and blood traces that would be invisible to traditional hunters. These aren't just individual hunters anymore. They're components of a precision instrument designed to harvest buffalo with unprecedented efficiency. The coordination required defies imagination. In an age before radio communication or even reliable maps, Eagle Eye manages to orchestrate 8 hunting parties moving in a slowly tightening circle across the prairie. The timing has to be perfect. Too fast, and the buffalo panic and scatter beyond recovery. Too slow, and the herds drift out of the trap before it can be sprung. The wolf method makes it possible. Tracking teams can predict exactly where wounded or stressed animals will move, allowing the circle to adjust and compensate in real time. When the Western teams encounter a buffalo group moving faster than expected, they can read the signs, stress patterns in hoofprints, scent trail intensity, grass damage indicating herd anxiety, and adjust their position accordingly. For 5 days, this massive operation unfolds across the Central Plains, and when it's over, they've harvested over 3,000 buffalo. 3,000. To put that in perspective, that's enough meat to feed the entire Cheyenne Nation for months, enough hides to trade with every ally from the Missouri River to the Rocky Mountains. But here's what makes this truly remarkable. They do it sustainably. This isn't the wasteful slaughter that white buffalo hunters will bring to the plains a century later. The Hunters' Council, a governing body of master trackers that emerged during this golden age, establishes quotas and seasonal restrictions designed to maintain buffalo populations for future generations. Think about the pred absolute sophistication required for this kind of resource management. The Hunters' Council tracks buffalo population trends across vast territories, monitors herd health through the wolf method's detailed sign-reading capabilities, and adjusts hunting pressure accordingly. They're practicing conservation biology before the term exists, managing wildlife populations with a precision that modern game departments would recognize. The military applications of the wolf method emerged during the war with the Pawnee Alliance in 1775. Cheyenne scouts discover that their micro-tracking skills translate perfectly to following enemy war parties. The same techniques that reveal wounded buffalo movement patterns work just as well for tracking human enemies across seemingly impossible terrain. The famous night raid on the Pawnee horse herds becomes a masterclass in applied tracking science. Traditional war parties would have needed bright moonlight and obvious trails to execute such an operation. But Cheyenne warriors, guided entirely by disturbed grass patterns barely visible under starlight, penetrate deep into enemy territory and escape with over 200 horses without losing a single man. The psychological impact on enemy tribes must have been devastating. How do you fight an enemy that can track you across bare rock, through streams, even in darkness? The wolf method doesn't just make the Cheyenne better hunters, it makes them seem supernatural to their opponents. During this golden age between 1760 and 1780, the Cheyenne effectively dominate the Central Plains from the Platte to the Arkansas rivers. But this isn't domination through military conquest alone. It's domination through superior technology, better resource management, and more effective knowledge systems. Trading posts begin appearing where Cheyenne hunting grounds meet other tribal territories. Buffalo meat, hides, and finished goods flow out while horses, European trade items, and raw materials flow in. The Cheyenne become the logistics hub for a trade network spanning half the continent, all built on the foundation of superior hunting capability. The elevation of tracking masters to positions equal to war chiefs represents a fundamental shift in Plains Indian political structure. When Eagle Eye becomes the first hunter chief to sit in the Council of 44, it acknowledges that in this new world, the ability to read invisible signs and manage resources effectively is as important as prowess in battle. But even at the height of success, shadows are gathering. Running Wolf's death in 1778 marks the end of an era. The old man dies as he lived, teaching. Caught in a sudden blizzard-triggered stampede while training young apprentices, his last words are reportedly instructions on reading track patterns in falling snow. Even facing death, he's thinking about knowledge transfer, about ensuring the Wolf method survives him. His funeral becomes a celebration of everything the technique has accomplished. Hunters from dozens of bands gather to share stories, techniques, and refinements developed over 35 years of practical application. But underneath the celebration, there's an awareness that change is coming to the plains. European diseases are beginning to thin buffalo herds in ways that even the most sophisticated conservation management can't address. Horse populations, essential to the Cheyenne hunting system, face periodic crashes from disease and harsh winters. Most ominously, reports filter in from the eastern edges of Cheyenne territory about strange new hunting parties, white men with long-range rifles who kill buffalo in massive numbers for their hides alone, leaving the meat to rot on the prairie. During the 1770s, master trackers begin developing new applications for the Wolf method. If it works for wounded buffalo and enemy war parties, what else might it track? Experiments begin with following individual horses across vast distances, locating lost children, even tracking weather patterns by reading how different atmospheric conditions affect grass and soil. The technique evolves beyond its original parameters. Third-generation practitioners, trained from childhood in the 7 signs, develop capabilities that would seem impossible to earlier generations. They can distinguish between tracks left by the same animal on different days, identify individual buffalo within herds by their unique movement signatures, even predict animal behavior hours in advance by reading stress indicators in their trail signs. Educational systems emerge that would be recognizable to modern academics. Master trackers take formal apprentices through structured learning programs. Knowledge becomes codified, standardized, and systematically transmitted. The oral tradition develops sophisticated memory techniques for preserving and passing down increasingly complex information. Women play crucial roles in this knowledge preservation system. Excluded from actual hunting by cultural tradition, they become the keepers of theoretical knowledge. Beadwork patterns encode the 7 signs in artistic form. Songs and stories embed tracking principles in memorable formats. When young men return from hunting expeditions, it's often the women who help them analyze what they observed, connecting field experience to theoretical understanding. By 1780, the Wolf method has created something unprecedented in Native American culture, a technological advantage so significant that it reshapes the entire political and economic landscape of the Central Plains. The Cheyenne haven't just learned to hunt better, they've learned to think systematically about observation, experimentation, and knowledge transfer. But technological advantages, as history repeatedly demonstrates, are temporary. New technologies emerge that make old ones obsolete. New challenges arise that old solutions can't address. As the 1780s dawn, carrying with them the first serious rumors of massive changes sweeping across the American continent, the Cheyenne face a question that would define the next century of their existence. What happens to masters of the silent hunt when the world becomes too loud for silence to matter? 1865. Eagle Eye is now an old man, his hair white as prairie snow, his hands gnarled from decades of reading signs in grass and earth. He stands on a ridge overlooking what was once the greatest buffalo range in North America, and for the first time in his 73 years, he struggles to find tracks worth following. The buffalo are disappearing. Not slowly, the way populations might naturally decline over generations, but with a speed that defies comprehension. Herds that numbered in the tens of thousands just 5 years earlier have been reduced to scattered bands of hundreds. And the reason isn't hard to find. The thunder of long-range rifles echoes across the prairie from dawn to dusk, as white buffalo hunters pursue a kind of industrial slaughter that makes the wolf method seem like ancient history. These new hunters don't need to read grass patterns or age blood spots. They don't need to understand animal behavior or predict movement patterns. They simply position themselves downwind of a herd, set up their powerful rifles, and kill buffalo by the dozens without moving from their shooting stands. A single hunter with a Sharps rifle can bring down more buffalo in an afternoon than a traditional Cheyenne hunting party could track and kill in a month. Eagle Eye watches this transformation with the bitter wisdom of someone who has lived long enough to see his life's work become obsolete. The wolf method, refined over 8 decades into the most sophisticated tracking system ever developed on the Great Plains, has been rendered irrelevant by technology he could never have imagined. But Eagle Eye is not just a master tracker, he's a survivor. He understands that adaptation isn't just about hunting techniques, it's about cultural survival itself. So he makes decisions that would have horrified his father's generation, sharing limited knowledge of the wolf method with army scouts like William Bent in hopes of gaining political advantages for his people. It's a devil's bargain, and Eagle Eye knows it, trading sacred knowledge for temporary protection, revealing secrets that took generations to develop in exchange for promises that may not be worth the breath used to speak them. But what choice does he have? The world has changed so fundamentally that the old rules no longer apply. The last great traditional hunt takes place in 1875, and it's led not by a man but by a woman. Mary Blackbird, 57 years old and trained in the wolf method since childhood, understands that this may be the final opportunity to demonstrate what generations of Cheyenne hunters have accomplished. Picture this scene: 57 years old, Mary Blackbird leading a group of young hunters across terrain that their great-grandfathers would have considered impossible to hunt. Buffalo herds have been scattered and spooked by constant rifle fire, making them wary of human approach in ways that no traditional hunting wisdom can address. The animals that remain are the smartest, the most careful, the hardest to track. Mary Blackbird uses every refinement the wolf method has developed over 8 decades. She reads grass patterns disturbed by nervous animals, follows blood trails left by buffalo wounded by amateur hunters, interprets scent markers that reveal stress levels and herd dynamics. Working with techniques that represent the absolute pinnacle of tracking science, she manages to harvest enough meat to sustain her band through the forced march to reservation lands. It's a masterpiece of applied hunting skill, and almost nobody witnesses it. The young hunters she leads are among the last generation to learn the complete wolf method. Within a decade, most of them will be dead from disease, warfare, or despair. The knowledge that took Running Wolf a lifetime to develop and Eagle Eye a lifetime to refine begins its slide toward extinction. The reservation years between 1880 and 1920 represent the darkest period in wolf method history. Practicing traditional hunting becomes illegal. Young Cheyenne men are forbidden from learning the 7 signs, prohibited from spending time alone on the prairie developing tracking skills, prevented from participating in the educational systems that had preserved and transmitted knowledge for generations. But knowledge, like energy, cannot be destroyed, only transformed. The wolf method goes underground, hidden in plain sight through the genius of desperate people determined to preserve their culture's greatest intellectual achievement. Children's games incorporate the 7 signs without appearing to do so. Kids playing seemingly innocent tracking games are actually learning to identify blood oxidation patterns and grass springback timing. Women's beadwork becomes more than decorative art. Complex patterns encode detailed information about track depth variations and scent trail degradation rates. Stories told around fires for entertainment contain hidden lessons about moisture patterns in hoofprints and temperature differences in disturbed earth. The technique transforms to meet new circumstances. Reservation life provides different opportunities for applying tracking skills, and Cheyenne practitioners adapt accordingly. They use their abilities to find lost cattle, track escaped horses, and locate missing children. During Prohibition, some become legendary for their ability to find bootleggers' operations hidden in remote locations. Think about the irony here. Skills developed for tracking wounded buffalo across vast prairies prove perfectly suited for following alcohol smugglers through canyons and creek beds. The same grass-reading abilities that once revealed buffalo migration patterns now help locate hidden stills and cache sites. The wolf method survives by becoming something its creators never intended, a tool for navigating the underground economy of reservation life. World War II brings unexpected opportunities for wolf method practitioners. Cheyenne men trained in traditional tracking techniques prove invaluable as military scouts and intelligence gatherers. Their ability to read terrain, predict movement patterns, and follow invisible trails translates perfectly to modern warfare. Some of the Pacific Theater's most successful reconnaissance missions are led by Native American soldiers whose grandfathers learned to track buffalo using techniques the Army never bothered to document. The modern revival begins in 1972, when Elder Joseph Stands in Timber makes a decision that parallels Running Wolf's original choice to share knowledge despite opposition. Stands in Timber reveals the complete wolf method system to tribal historians, recognizing that cultural preservation sometimes requires breaking cultural taboos about secret knowledge. The timing proves perfect. The American Indian movement has created new pride in traditional culture, while environmental awareness movements provide context for understanding Native American conservation practices. Academic anthropologists finally begin taking indigenous knowledge systems seriously, documenting techniques that European science is only beginning to rediscover. Today's revival of the wolf method represents something unprecedented in the history of indigenous knowledge preservation, where the conscious resurrection of a traditional technique using modern tools. Contemporary Cheyenne hunters combine ancient micro-tracking skills with GPS technology, reading grass patterns their ancestors discovered while simultaneously checking satellite weather data. Young Cheyenne men now learn the 7 signs through formal educational programs integrated into tribal colleges. Women study traditional beadwork patterns that preserve tracking knowledge while earning degrees in wildlife biology. Elders who learned fragments of the technique during the Prohibition years work with university researchers to reconstruct complete methodologies. The wolf method lives on in a world Running Wolf could never have imagined. Adapted for circumstances Eagle Eye never anticipated, preserved through determination Mary Blackbird would have admired. GPS coordinates replace landscape memorization, but the fundamental skill of reading invisible signs remains unchanged. Digital cameras document track patterns that were once preserved only in human memory, but the ability to interpret those patterns still requires the same patient observation that Running Wolf developed during those winter months following actual wolves. Perhaps most remarkably, modern applications of the wolf method extend far beyond hunting. Search and rescue teams use adapted versions of the 7 signs to locate missing persons. Wildlife biologists employ traditional tracking techniques to study animal populations with unprecedented precision. Law enforcement agencies train officers in micro-tracking skills that help solve crimes through evidence too subtle for conventional forensic analysis. The technique that began with a hungry man watching wolves in 1742 has evolved into a comprehensive system for reading the hidden stories that surround us every day. In a world where technology often separates us from direct observation of the natural world, the wolf method offers something precious: the ability to see what has always been there, waiting for eyes trained to recognize the language that grass and earth have been speaking all along. Running Wolf, cast out for questioning tradition, created a new tradition that proved more durable than the circumstances that birth it. His legacy lives on, not in museums or history books, but in the continuing ability of human beings to read the invisible stories written by everything that moves across the face of the earth. The grass never stopped speaking. We just had to remember how to listen.